the hiring process. Whatever side of it you're on, whether you're the person that's hiring people or you're the person that's applying for a job, it can be a lengthy process. It can take so much time and effort and energy because as a hiring manager, as an owner of a company, you want to bring on the right people that are going to help you take that company to the next level. And as the employee, as the person that's looking to be hired from this company, you want to show them like, hey, I can take you here. I can do this, that, and the third. I got you. Trust me. So with the Baltimore Ravens, what we're going to do, we're going to try to look at this thing from both sides to see what the Ravens could possibly do for the next offensive coordinator and more importantly, what the next offensive coordinator could do for the Ravens. So sit back, relax, and let's get locked on.
And you know just what I mean. You too, team, keep it clean. You see my boy, he like gotta made it. Boy, that's my homie, ain't that right engraving.
So team, keep it clean. A very special guest in the building, my guy Kevin Ostreicher from Locked On Ravens. Before we get into it, please let everybody know who you are, what you do, and where they can find you.
Yeah, I appreciate you for having me. You can find me over first on Twitter at ChaosStriker34, but I do host and produce Locked On Ravens. It's a daily podcast 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. We talk all things Ravens about 25 to 30 minutes, sometimes 35. We're over on YouTube, so you can find us over there. Subscribe to that channel. It's also in audio form. It's the same show, both audio and video. So Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify. And then I also write for Ravens Wire, and you can find me right in there 7 days a week. So I'm covering the Ravens everywhere. I'm very in tune with the organization and everything that's going on right now, especially this offensive coordinator search is going on.
That's perfect, man. So I will have all the links to everything down below in the description. So you spoke about the offensive coordinator search. Obviously, Greg Roman, he stepped down from the Baltimore Ravens. So there's a vacancy at offensive coordinator. And we're going to talk about some of your different candidates, who you feel like some of the best three candidates are for the position. But first, before we get into that, what do you feel like this Ravens offense is missing? What do you think they're needing to add to really get to that next level?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of people have kind of put the emphasis on the Ravens need something more, some oomph in the passing game, where this has been a rushing team for the last 4 years. Obviously, that was Greg Roman's bread and butter, and that has been over the course of his career, where he is known as kind of like that run game specialist. But the passing offenses throughout even his time in San Francisco, in Buffalo, and now Baltimore, they've all been kind of iffy. And so, 2019, it was great. I think it was a breath of fresh air for a lot of people, that 14-2 offense where they were the top team in rushing, but they also had a top 10 pass offense that year. But then I feel like after that, we just didn't really see enough growth from the offense, where things just got stale passing wise. Everybody talks about the pass concepts, the time management when it comes to the play clock, and even what we saw in the wild card loss to Cincinnati, that kind of end of game time management. And some of that does fall on John Harbaugh, just the actual time management part of things. But for Roman, it was just, it felt like time was up for both the Ravens and Roman in terms of that relationship. It just felt like both parties needed to move on. So, I mean, just being more innovative in the passing game and kind of letting what, could be Lamar Jackson, could be somebody else. We don't really know right now, but whoever that quarterback is, spread their wings and kind of, I think the offense kind of held Lamar Jackson back in a couple aspects, especially passing wise. So being able to, if it is Lamar Jackson, have him spread his wings and be able to maximize all parts of his game, not just some of it.
Yeah, that's some good points. Now, we'll just jump straight into it. Who are your top three candidates for the Ravens offensive coordinator position? Who do you feel like would be the three best fits for the Baltimore Ravens? And like you mentioned, whether it be the Baltimore Ravens with Lamar Jackson or possibly the Baltimore Ravens without.
Yeah, and it's so crazy to kind of think about. There's a lot that rides on this next offensive coordinator, and there's a lot that rides on who's the quarterback for the Ravens. And you're kind of thinking it goes hand in hand because, John Harbaugh and Eric DeCosta talked about how Lamar's going to have some input. They've talked to him about the offensive coordinator position and what that might be, but the Ravens, they're leaving no stone unturned here. It feels like they're taking their time, and probably because I said that, they're going to hire the guy in like 5 minutes. But I think for what the Ravens have right now, they don't have to tear every single thing down from what they did on offense. They can keep some of it, but obviously you need to bring in a lot of new. And for me, there are conversations about, should it be an internal guy or an external guy? We've known the Ravens, they trust their coaching staff and they trust their guys.
Yeah.
I think it should be an external hire. I think that it's time for them to bring in some new ideas from outside the organization. So for me, I think if I had to pick my top three going 3-2-1, I think my third would probably be Todd Monken, who's the offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach over there at Georgia. Has had a couple of stints at the NFL level, was Tampa Bay's offensive coordinator for 3 years, also was in Cleveland for a season. His NFL tenure wasn't super successful. He did have 1 year where the pass offense was pretty good in Tampa, but the rushing offenses were like 27th, 29th in the league. And Tampa hasn't been able to run the ball for a couple of years now. That they don't really, that's not their bread and butter. But he's somebody who I think you can bring in that style of offense. And the Ravens had success bringing in another college coordinator last offseason, Mike McDonald. I think Monken's he's intriguing, I would say. And that's a name I guess I would keep an eye on. Number 2 for me is probably Zach Robinson from the Rams. He's somebody who I know was linked to the Chargers. Now they have Kellen Moore, so that's no longer an option. But he's someone where we can all admit the Rams offense was disastrous in 2022. But in 2021, when they won the Super Bowl, they had the top rated pass offense in the league in terms of net per attempt. And Robinson, I think, was a big part of that. He's a former quarterback himself, also worked over at PFF for a couple of years, is a guy who has a lot of experience. He has a lot of experience. So he understands the game. And obviously coming from that McVay tree, people, talking about the McVay, Shanahan, Reed trees, that's what a lot of people want to see here, because those have been the offenses, or at least some of the offenses that have been super successful. And then number 1 for me is Eric Bieniemy from the Chiefs, where I just think there are so many questions, I think, surrounding Bieniemy in his situation in Kansas City. He's been on a couple of 1-year deals over the last few seasons, so his contract actually expires after this year. So for him, it's either he goes back to Kansas City on maybe another 1-year deal, he gets a head coaching opportunity somewhere, or does he take a lateral move to a team like a Baltimore, where the questions surrounding Bieniemy are how much of the offense is his offense and how much of it is Andy Reid, how much of it is Patrick Mahomes. Now, look, Bieniemy's been there for a long time now. He has a lot to do with the offense. And we saw him with the play sheet against Cincinnati. We also saw Andy Reid with the play sheet against Cincinnati. So the questions are, does he call the plays all the time? How much input does he have from Reid? I know that some people think that the only way that he'd be able to get a head coaching opportunity is if he moves out of the shadow of Andy Reid, takes over an offense that is solely 100% no questions asked his offense. And I think for him, putting him in a situation with Lamar Jackson, I think that's super intriguing to me overall. So those are just the names that we've heard be linked to Baltimore in some way, shape, or form. There are a couple other guys that we haven't heard actual formal reports on yet, such as I think Brian Johnson, the quarterback's coach from Philadelphia, would be intriguing. Bobby Slowick, the pass game coordinator from San Francisco, another really solid option. But in terms of actual names that we've heard, I'd say Monken, Robinson, and then Bieniemy is my 3-2-1.
Okay. And I like that, because something that you talked about would be the Ravens hiring externally instead of from within, like we've been used to for a while now. And that can be both a good and a bad thing to hire from within. It can be a good thing because it shows that there's progression and there's advancement. There's job advancement, career advancement with people who join the Ravens staff. As we've seen a lot of coaches. We've seen former players turn coaches with the Baltimore Ravens, and they go on and get other opportunities, which is great. That's phenomenal. But on offense, it really seems like you mentioned, they need to bring somebody from the outside in instead of the inside and up. Now, since as of right now, they still haven't hired anybody to be their offensive coordinator, there is a possibility that they do hire from the inside. So let's talk about some of the inside candidates and what you feel the possibilities could be with them, and who it could possibly be and what they could possibly do.
Yeah, so the reports that we've heard so far, the time we're recording this, is the Ravens have interviewed 2 guys internally in quarterback coach James Urban and tight ends coach George Godsey. I think another option could be T. Martin, who him and Godsey have play calling experience Urban was the assistant offensive coordinator in Philadelphia for, I think, a very, very brief time. But Urban comes from the Andy Reid coaching tree. He was, with the Eagles for a while in Philadelphia, went to Cincinnati, I think, as the wide receivers guy before coming over to Baltimore. Godsey was the offensive coordinator in Houston for a couple of seasons. That didn't necessarily go super duper well, but I think that still there are a couple of trees you can break these off into, which is internal versus external. Then with that tree, do you want a play caller, someone who's had play calling experience, or do you want to go new and have someone come in who hasn't had play calling experience? And then what kind of offense do you want? Is this something where I think Baltimore could benefit from more of a West Coast style offense, which, more timing routes. You want to focus on the deep passing game. So both Godsey and T. Martin have had actual play calling experience. Obviously, Martin has a plethora of coaching experience, especially at the college level. Former quarterback himself, too. So talking about former quarterbacks, T. Martin, former one there. And then all those guys, I don't think they're necessarily bad candidates. I don't want to just dismiss them and say, just because they're with the Ravens doesn't mean they're going to be good. I mean, I think that they would be fine. But I think this is an opportunity for them where Greg Roman was an internal hire. Marty Morningweg was an internal hire. You want to go back, guys like Jim Caldwell. He was an internal hire back in the middle of that 2012 season. Now, the Ravens have done external hires with the offensive coordinator position. I mean, Gary Kubiak worked out really well for him, but then Mark Trestman was a disaster. So, you kind of have give and take in terms of just because the guys from outside the organization doesn't mean it's all going to be sunshine and rainbows. And even defensively, I know the question is still, was Mike McDonald really an external hire? Because he was with the Ravens for like 8 years before he went to Michigan for one season. So it was kind of like an internal, internal guy. But I just think for now, you don't have to tear everything down again if you're the Ravens right now, where I know John Harbaugh and Eric DeCosta talked about it, where they want to keep some of that offense. And I think they should, because they had so much success running the football.
Right.
But if you can keep the good from your old offense and kind of pick and choose what you want from that, and then move into a new era and make, I think, a pretty solid hire with whoever it is, and then they can add their guys. They can maybe bring in a coach or two from where they were previously. I mean, we saw it with Mike McDonald last year, where he brought in Ryan Osborne, who was a defensive assistant from Michigan. They picked David Ajabo, who obviously was one of Mike McDonald's guys in Michigan. So whoever comes in as this new offensive coordinator, I'm intrigued to see not obviously just what offense they run. That's a huge part of it. But if there are going to be any minor coaching changes, because maybe this new guy will want to bring in a different, who knows, tight ends coach or assistant offensive line coach or something like that, plus maybe a player or two. But I think internally, those guys aren't bad options in Urban, Martin, and even Godsey. But I think it feels better to me, or I think it would, if the Ravens were to hire somebody from outside the organization who can bring in new and innovative ideas.
Okay, that's a really good point. That's something that I didn't think about, as far as with the offensive coordinator, them wanting to bring in some of their own guys too, to help coach. Now, to close it out, you talked about the three candidates who you feel would be best for the job, but just off of a hunch, maybe a gut feeling, who do you think actually will get the job?
Ooh, Okay, I'll make the prediction. It feels like if Kellen Moore didn't get fired by Dallas, Zach Robinson would have gone there. And that's just a complete hunch, no inside information. But I feel like now that Moore is in Los Angeles, I'm going to predict it's Robinson. I think that he's a young, bright, innovative mind. I believe he's 36 years old. And again, he's someone who sees the game a different way because he played the position, and T. Martin also played the position of quarterback. So I think if you're able to bring in somebody who is quarterback savvy and can work with a Lamar Jackson, or if it's not Lamar Jackson, can work with whoever the quarterback is and kind of figure things out, plus bring in those new ideas, comes from the McVay coaching tree. They've requested to interview him, obviously, and that happened already. I think that while I think Bieniemy is my top choice, I would not be disappointed if Robinson was the guy, because I know people will look at the Los Angeles offense in 2022 and be like, they were so bad in 2022, and the offense was not good. It was very apparent, but they dealt with injuries at that position, and multiple positions. Stafford was out, Kupp was out, Allen Robinson ended up being in. Robinson didn't really do well over there anyway. The running back situation was pretty dire, but I think with the Chargers opening being filled, to me, I think the Ravens organization, their coordinator vacancy is the top vacancy available. I even thought that before the Chargers opening was filled, just by a little bit. I think you could kind of go neck and neck between those two. But for me, I will predict that Zach Robinson is the next guy, but I'm excited to see if it actually is. And I'm hoping they make the right hire, because I think this is really important. I think they have to get it right, especially with how the offense has looked over the past couple of seasons. If there are more recurring issues over the next couple of seasons with the new guy, it just continues to kind of set a trend, which you don't really want to set. So the Ravens are leaving no stone unturned here. It feels like they're taking their time, and I think that's the right call for them to do.
And hey, we appreciate you leaving no stone unturned with all the research that you did with all of these prospects for Ravens offensive coordinator position. So appreciate you coming on. And one more time before we get out of here, let everybody know where they can find you at, where they could listen to that nice intro music that you got too.
Yeah, Ingraven is my intro music hype guy. So I appreciate you, Ingraven, as always. You can find me over again on Twitter at Chaos Record 34, the Locked On Ravens podcast as well. We are on YouTube 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. So Ravens news, analysis, updates, also in audio form 5 days a week. Same show, both audio and video. So if you want to subscribe, follow along on that journey, you're more than welcome to do so. Also, Ravens Wire, I write there 7 days per week. So I'll be covering it. I'll be seeing who this next offensive coordinator is, and I'm excited to see who it is.
All right, Kevin, appreciate you coming on again. Team Keep It Clean. Make sure you go check out all of his stuff, which will, again, be down below in the description. And we out.
Yeah, this feels like a joke.